Hello and welcome to Moneylife News and Views. I'm Debashis Basu. Many people seem to now be suddenly bewildered by the sudden slowdown in India's economic growth. But had you kept your gaze firmly fixed on India's policy making, the slowdown would hardly seem surprising, let alone seem inexplicable. Since public memory is short, here is a quick recap. For the first few years of Prime Minister Mr. Modi's tenure, India's economic policy was largely incoherent. India went through two Reserve Bank governors and a finance minister who didn't exactly set the Yamuna on fire. The government's main focus, remember, was on a bunch of social schemes. Swachh Bharat, Jan Dhan, Digital India, Beti Bachao, Beti Padhao, Suraksha Bima, Jeevan Jyoti Bima, Atal Pension, Namami Gange, Soil Health Card, and so on and so forth. These and the economic schemes of that period, like Make in India, Skills India, Mudra loans, and Startup India, were all heavy on slogans and propaganda, but the impact on the ground was not really game-changing. With the economy continuing to hobble along from the previous regime's missteps, the final blow was demonetization of high-value currency notes in November 2016, which devastated millions of small businesses and 1.5 million jobs at a conservative estimate. And then came the poorly planned and hastily implemented goods and services tax. Now, these two moves put together wrecked supply chains and hollowed out the economy during the adjustment period. By 2019, every economic indicator was flashing red. Rising unemployment, poor export growth, punitive tax rates, tax terrorism, imploding public sector, collapse in GDP growth rate to 5%, effectively 3.5% under the old calculations, because the government changed the way GDP was calculated and increased it by 1.5%. So the growth was really down to 3.5% on a comparable basis. Dr. Manmohan Singh, who had often been at the butt of Mr. Modi's jokes, got his own back. He gently pointed out that the nominal GDP growth was at a 15-year low, household consumption at a 4-decade low, unemployment at a 45-year high, and bad loans of banks at an all-time high. And finally, growth in electricity generation was at a 15-year low, and so on. Businessmen were restless. This is full 5 years after the Modi government had come to power. Mr. Mohandas Pai, a vocal advocate of nearly every policy of the current administration in social media, suddenly had a different tune. He did not mince words at all when he sounded the alarm. Tax terrorism has gone rampant. The compliance burden has increased massively. There is a fear psychosis, he lamented. There's a prevailing belief among government officials that all businessmen are crooks and must be pursued. His grim assessment of the business climate echoed across India's corporate corridors. I have never seen mood and morale so down. Businessmen have given up hope, he said. The late Rahul Bajaj, quite outspoken, titan of the industry, was blunt. There is no demand and no private investment. So where will the growth come from? It doesn't fall from the heavens. A.M. Naik, then head of Larsen Toubro, suggested that India would be fortunate to achieve even 6.5% GDP growth. More tellingly, he cast doubt on the reliability of the official data itself, remarking that the situation is challenging on data credibility. A panicky government enacted a drastic corporate tax cut on 2019, which I've always called a knee-jerk reaction. They hoped to spark investment and job creation. So grateful businessmen held on to all their tax cuts rather than investing the money that they got from the government. Why? Because demand was weak. There was no point in investing. So tax cuts went straight to the corporate treasuries. And then came the pandemic, which dealt a further blow to a weak economy. Data shows that growth between 2014 and 2022, a period marked by the same Prime Minister and two finance ministers, barring small interim stints by Mr. Piyush Goyal, was driven almost entirely by government borrowing and spending. Indian households and businesses contributed a very small share of this growth. Now, the economic rebound that followed, the demand compression during the pandemic was sharp. It was sharp all around the world, and India was a beneficiary of the demand compression as well. And with the stabilization of GST system and very strong tax compliance, government revenues surged. Now, capitalizing on this windfall and adding massive borrowings to the pot, the government decided to go all in terms of leading the charge on investment and growth. The budget 2023-24 announced a massive capital outlay of 10 lakh crore, which is increased to 11 lakh crore next year, to be spent on railways, roads, urban transport, waterworks, energy transformation, and defense production. The heavy hand of the state has rolled the dice of growth with a tax and spend model for 2 years now. Yet, in a society where rule of law is weak, corruption is rampant, and red tape is entrenched, limitations to this strategy is obvious. Also, if tax and spend was expected to trickle down, it has failed. India's rural wages are stagnant, which has wrecked consumption growth. Given that the government expenditure has been the sole driver of growth so far, with neither private capital expenditure nor household consumption contributing meaningfully, when the government spending slowed down in FY25, the inevitable deceleration in GDP followed. As I said, this current slowdown is neither surprising nor inexplicable. So this then is a summary of Indian policymaking over the last 11 years and its impact. After the knee-jerk income tax acts of 2019, continuous increase in all other kinds of taxes, cess, etc., and a flood of government capex since 2023, here is a final report card. The economy has normalized to 5 to 6% growth. Exports and the rupee are weak. Inflation and interest rates will not drop much, and taxes will remain high. In other words, every single feature of India's lower middle income status remain intact. On February 1st, we will have another budget session. I have no idea what it will contain. What I do know is that it will not move the needle much. Fiscal deficit, states and center put together, is extraordinarily high. It's almost 89% of GDP. That limits the scope for further increase in government spending. Taxes will only be tinkered with, disappointing an already frustrated populace. We are likely to get more of the same as in the previous years with exactly the same outcome. Thanks for watching this, and if you liked it, please do share and do subscribe to this channel in case you haven't. Thank you.